On a Tuesday morning that felt like every other Tuesday of the past 30 years, John opened an email that ended his career. It arrived at 9:14 a.m. The subject line was neutral. Ordinary. Forgettable. The message was 12 lines long. Position eliminated. Effective immediately. No meeting. No warning. No handshake. Just a calendar invite that appeared seconds later. Transition meeting. John stared at the screen. Calibri. Size 11. Clean corporate formatting. 32 years of loyalty reduced to standard font. At 60 years old, he walked out of the glass headquarters carrying a cardboard box. It was winter. The wind cut through the parking lot. His breath turned white in the cold air and disappeared almost instantly, like proof he had ever worked there. Inside the box were pieces of a life that no longer mattered to anyone but him. Family photos. A cactus from a promotion. Engraved pens for milestones. A thick folder of reports he had stayed up finishing just last Thursday. Documents that would likely be deleted before the week ended. John paused at his car and looked back at the building. For 3 decades he had believed in something simple. Work hard. Stay loyal. Be reliable. And when the time comes, the company will protect you. He had missed birthdays for product launches. Cancelled vacations for audits. Delayed anniversaries for urgent restructuring meetings. He wasn't reckless. He was responsible. He thought responsibility was a contract. Then came the merger. New executives. New language. Optimization. Lean restructuring. Long-term scalability. To the consultants with tablets and heat maps, John wasn't the man who saved the 2014 contract. He was a number. A high-cost unit. Too expensive. Too experienced. Too old. The first morning of unemployment felt unreal. He still woke at 5:30 a.m. His body didn't know he had been erased. He showered. Shaved. Pressed a shirt. At 8 a.m. he sat at the kitchen table with a folder labeled Send Resumes. 47 applications. 12 personalized cover letters. 3 screenings. No offers. 1 interview stayed with him. The hiring manager looked about 26. Bright sneakers. Smartwatch. Fast voice. Your resume is incredible, the young man said politely. But we're looking for someone who can grow with us long term. John understood the translation. We want someone younger. He sat in his car afterward, staring at his hands. These hands had managed supply chains worth hundreds of millions. Now they felt unnecessary. At 60, he felt invisible. He stopped going to Saturday coffee with friends. He avoided former colleagues. He couldn't answer the question. So, what are you doing these days? At night, the house felt louder than the factory floor ever had. He wasn't just unemployed. He was undefined. For 30 years he had been John from operations. Without the title, who was John? 3 months passed. 3 long, silent months. Then one night, unable to sleep, he walked into the garage. The fluorescent light flickered. Dust covered the old workbench his father had given him decades ago. Underneath the clutter sat tools he hadn't touched in years. A plane. Chisels. A handsaw. He ran his fingers across the cold steel. For the first time in months, something inside him didn't feel numb. It felt remembered. And without knowing it yet, that night was the real beginning. The next morning, John didn't put on a tie. He didn't open his laptop. He drove to the local lumber yard and bought a single slab of white oak. No business plan. No strategy. Just the need to build something real. Back in the garage, he cleared the bench. The first cut was rough. His hands, once steady in boardrooms, trembled slightly over the chisel. His back ached. His measurements were off. He cut one board 2 inches too short. He muttered under his breath. But something felt different. When he made a mistake, it was his mistake. Not a committee's. Not a consultant's. His. He began waking at 5:30 again. But now it wasn't anxiety pulling him out of bed. It was curiosity. How would the grain look once planed? Would the joints fit tight? Could he still do this? He spent hours sanding, hours adjusting, hours learning again. He watched woodworking videos late into the night. Not out of desperation. Out of interest. The garage slowly changed. Old office chairs went to the curb. Boxes of important corporate files were shredded. Broken monitors disappeared. In their place, sharpened chisels. Better lighting. Clean clamps. Organized shelves. He wasn't reclaiming space. He was reclaiming himself. The first finished piece was a small coffee table. It wasn't perfect. One corner sat slightly proud. The finish wasn't flawless. But it was solid. It had weight. It had warmth. When he ran his hand across the grain, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Ownership. His daughter Emily visited that weekend. She stood in the garage, studying the table. "Dad," she said quietly, "I haven't seen you this alive in a long time." She took a photo and posted it online. John expected nothing. Maybe a polite comment. Instead, within an hour, a message arrived. "Is this for sale?" A local cafe owner needed 3 custom bistro tables. John sat at the kitchen table that night, staring at the message. His heart beat the way it used to before major presentations. Only this time, there were no shareholders. No executives. Just wood. Labor. Value. He quoted a price that felt fair. She accepted immediately. When he delivered those tables, he watched customers run their hands across the surface. They noticed the grain. They noticed the weight. They noticed the difference. And for the first time in months, John felt seen. Orders trickled in. A bookshelf for a neighbor. A desk for a former colleague working from home. A custom dining table for a young couple. The sent resumes folder on his computer stopped growing. Dust collected on it. His garage no longer felt like a graveyard of old projects. It felt like a sanctuary. He realized something important. In the corporate world, success had been abstract. Spreadsheets. Forecasts. Performance metrics. Now success was tangible. He could touch it. A table that would hold Thanksgiving dinners. A desk where someone would write their future. A shelf that would carry family photos. Nothing about it was optimized. But it was real. By the time he turned 62, he was working harder than ever. But the exhaustion felt different. It wasn't hollow. It was earned. He wasn't John who got laid off. He was becoming John the craftsman. And that changed everything. At 63, the garage was too small. John rented a modest industrial space. High ceilings. Concrete floors. The sweet scent of sawdust in the air. He bought better equipment. He hung his father's old tools on the wall. And then, for the first time in years, he conducted an interview. Not for a manager. Not for an analyst. For an apprentice. Leo was 19. Restless. Impatient. Frustrated with a world that told him success meant debt and a desk job. But when he watched Leo fit 2 joints together perfectly, he saw something familiar. Hunger. John hired him. Not because of a resume. Because of character. He taught him one rule above all. Measure twice. Cut once. Not just in wood. In life. Then, one rainy Thursday afternoon, his phone rang. The caller ID froze him. It was the corporation that had eliminated him. A new regional director. They were opening a flagship. Innovation hub. They wanted something. Authentic. Something. Grounded. Something with history. They had seen his work. They wanted custom installations for the lobby and executive boardrooms. 3 years earlier, he had been a high-cost unit. Now they wanted his craftsmanship. John looked around the workshop. Leo standing in the corner. Sunlight cutting through floating dust. The steady hum of real work. He didn't feel anger. He felt calm. He drafted a proposal. Clear. Direct. Honest. He quoted a price that reflected his true value. They accepted within 48 hours. Walking back into that building felt surreal. The same fluorescent lights. The same quiet tension in the air. He saw younger employees staring at screens the way he once had. He didn't feel bitterness. He felt gratitude. Losing that job had not destroyed him. It had freed him. He installed reclaimed oak panels in their executive boardroom. Heavy. Solid. Unmistakably real. Executives ran their hands across the grain, impressed. They spoke about texture and authenticity. John simply nodded. He understood something they didn't. Authenticity can't be ordered. It must be built. At 65, John wakes without an alarm. He checks the moisture level of lumber instead of emails. He plans projects instead of meetings. His back aches more when it rains. But he moves with purpose. His daughter sees not a retired man, but a fulfilled one. His apprentice sees not a boss, but a mentor. And John sees something he hadn't seen at 60. His own worth. He often thinks back to that Tuesday morning. The email. The box. The cold wind. He once believed that was the end. Now he knows it was a transition. Just not the one the company intended. A corporation can take your title. It can take your office. It can take your benefits. But it cannot take your skill. It cannot take your spirit. Unless you let it. For anyone standing in a parking lot today with a cardboard box in their hands, your best years are not behind you. Sometimes the contract has to end before your real work begins. Because at 60, John learned the most important thing he would ever build was himself.